Okay, ready?
Rolling.
All right, let's hop in. So what do you think social media is primarily used for?
Well, thank you, Lauren, for having me on your podcast.
Oh, you meant from the beginning. Okay.
Yeah, I'm honored to be the first person of your series, which I'm sure will be greatly beneficial for the world, and hopefully you'll become well known and work in the media afterwards. So
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, there's a couple different answers to that, right? I mean, what do people use it for? Here's a picture of my cat climbing the Christmas tree. Here's a dog eating someone's slice of pizza at a bar, or whatever. But really, there's two things I want to talk about. Is first, basically what's it used for? It's used to extract personal data and information to profit from. Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just the bottom line. So they extract all of our information, what we do, what we like, what we think, what we buy, what we're talking about, and sell that information to advertisers. Then the other issue I think that's important is the role of power and control, especially with information, with social media. Because right now we've got Meta, which used to be Facebook, right? So I mean, they own like Messenger, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, etc. They got at least 2.2 billion users, mm-hmm. right? And this is the most powerful platform basically in the world. And 45 to 67% of Americans get their news from social media, right? Mm-hmm. So Facebook, Twitter, I mean, there's more people on there getting information and stuff than from news, TV news, and so forth. So basically then whoever controls these algorithms, which I know you've got questions about that, has a lot of power and authority and ability to promote certain accounts of information and then not promote other kinds of information. So that, I think it's this monopoly, this gigantic monopoly now that controls the communication system. We really need to be thinking critically about that and what that means, especially when they have so much power over speech and so forth. And that obviously impacts, politics, but also the environment, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. And they're intertwined, obviously.
Yeah. And sort of a follow-up question to that, do you think let's say when the founder of Facebook, when he was creating this, do you think he had this in mind, or do you think it kind of slowly turned into just this control aspect of media?
Well, remember, if you look back, pre-1996, the Telecommunications Act, mm-hmm. which privatized the internet.
Yeah.
Before, the internet was kind of like, it was a public commons. It was open to everybody. People working in the computers would help design it and create it. It was kind of like a collective good. Wasn't controlled by advertisers and so forth. And it was a whole different thing. Okay. So like some of these original internet people, if they're around today, they saw it, they would probably have a heart attack and fall down, mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, what happened to what we thought the internet would be? And so, President Clinton in 1996 with telecommunications companies, they privatized it. And it took several years and years and years. Advertisers knew there was something there, but they didn't know how they could make money from it.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of advertising companies, they invested in this. They were losing money for years and years and years. And then eventually, bam, wow.
Just blew up.
Realized,
yeah.
This is the biggest gift. I think, we'll talk about that in a little bit. They can make all this money from the data and stuff. So it took a while. But, so it's dramatically changed when, mm-hmm. The guy who started Facebook, I think it was more, he was in his dorm, right? He just wanted to communicate with people, have parties and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's obviously evolved as has the internet and then so have powerful interests of trying to influence it. And then today we've got something that should be kind of a public communication medium, completely privatized, profit-driven, monopoly-owned, so forth.
Yeah, what started off as something that's supposed to connect us all kind of turned into just a profit-driven
exploit us all.
Yeah,
It's
it's
our
almost
labor.
kind of isolates us from each other because now we're all sucked into our phone. So it's like kind of had the opposite effect of what it was intended for.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of propaganda saying, "Oh, the more you talk about yourself, the more this world will be better." Well, it's the more you talk about yourself, the more money they're going to make, and it's exploitative, right? We do the labor, meaning we talk about our friends, talk about what we like, we buy things, and they collect all the data and they sell it. Okay. And they say, well, the services are free. Sure. But how much do they make off a person per year? It's like up to $5,000. That's probably an extreme case. It's probably much less. But so, the currency of the digital world, the internet, is our behavior. Okay?
Yeah, our information. Yeah. That is very scary to think about. Do you think, so with all this social media comes social media influencers, and why do you think that content creators or these influencers have such an influence over their audience?
Well, I'm not sure if they do in all cases, right? But like we talked about, for commercial purposes, I think they do influence us because they gather so much data, our likes, our opinions, what we're thinking. It's extremely scientific. And then what's the goal with all the information that they have that no one else has? To try to manipulate us, okay, to buy more things or believe this, right? And, part of the problem with that, with the advertising-driven internet and social influencers and branding and so forth, it's that the production and consumption of all these goods and services are, aided by advertising. They're key drivers of global warming. Okay, so that's one of the things that's just pushing global warming, greenhouse gas emissions, and so forth. This production of all these goods and services. And so now the internet is basically run by advertisers. They've got all the information. What do they do with it? They want us to consume more. They're using it for individualized messages, right? And they know everything about us. We'll talk more about that. So, you go visit a site that's going to trigger 56 minimum instances of people extracting your data. Okay, you've got companies out there. They've got 400 million people. They've got over 900 records on them, all kind of data points, 5,000 to 6,000 data points on individuals and so forth, right? So again, this is a massive surveillance system set up, and the goal is to sell the information to advertisers and so forth, and push more consumption and so forth, which is definitely problematic, right? If it goes back, how the internet first evolved, that wasn't the case, right? That wasn't the case. So, I think the infrastructure of the internet that we have today is pushing the world in the wrong direction in the global warming crisis. Okay, so we need to rethink it. We need to reform it and so forth.
All right. And so how do you think brand engagement via social media plays a role in consumer behavior?
I think it's pretty effective. You've got all the data, personal stuff, and so forth. And they have a lot of loyalty points. The more you do this, the more you like this, you can get this and get that. And people are more engaged. At least that's the goal, right? And I think a lot of people accept it. They can't get out of it. It's like we're fish in water.
Yeah.
Right? We don't realize we're in water. There's so many advertisements. We see thousands and thousands every day. And it's like a lifestyle now. But not everyone can afford lifestyle. And I think that's a problem. Because a lot of these loyalty programs and engagement they often benefit the super wealthy. People are really wealthy more than regular people because they consume more, they get better reductions and all these things like that.
Yeah, they get more points. Yeah.
Yeah, they get more points, the more you consume, and so forth. So it's kind of like inherent, has a class bias in it to a certain extent. But also people are going more in debt, right? If you look from the 60s to the 2000s, like the 60s, people were kind of like, they didn't have much debt, right? Went from virtually like nothing in the 50s to like 12 billion in the early 2000s. So, and this consumer culture, it's kind of this weird circular thing. It creates some depression because everybody wants this. We all want that. We wish we were wealthy. We see the pictures of people. I wish they're all happy. Wow, it looks like this amazing thing. But it also creates depression because we can't live that way. Majority of people can't.
It's unrealistic.
It's problematic. So it's like unattainable aspirations. And then the problem is those who are depressed consume more than those who are happy, right?
Because they're looking for that fulfillment.
Yeah. So it's a circular thing. Happier people are less likely to consume things. So it's really fascinating how this demand is created and to observe.
Yeah, just kind of creating this negative cycle of just needing more and more and more.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we kind of touched on this a little bit, but what are your opinions on online advertising and how do you think it's changed the world of advertising?
Well, this was the biggest gift. The online world was the biggest gift to advertising. And I was just thinking earlier today, there was a program in the 70s, look it up on YouTube, I'm sure, called Fantasy Island, right?
Okay.
And you show up there and they're like, oh, what's your fantasy? And if it was advertising showed up on this island, they would be like, I want to know everything about everybody so I can create individualized messages to them, right? That's their fantasy, okay? But then there's always this negative side if you watch the program. And, well, the negative side is, well, this overconsumption is going to, it's harming the planet significantly. Right?
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, it's overwhelming. I think it's too powerful because it controls the infrastructure that we have with the online world. It's not always good for our mental health, right? Obviously, the environment. I think we'll talk more about that. It's really propelling the disaster forward. So again, but the online world is like the best gift for the advertising world. They know everything, and it's invasive. They know it can be abused. It goes against our privacy. It can be used by politicians, and so forth. So it definitely has also had a negative effect on journalism, right? Because now advertisers can find out those exact people who they want to target. And, advertising used to fund journalism. And now we're seeing a massive crisis of journalism in the United States. There's fewer papers left. There's news deserts. It's not looking very good. There's like 1 out of 3 journalists left in the last 25 years or something like that.
And they have the power to shape those narratives that are going into the journalism's, like everything that's being published.
Exactly. Yeah. Once you are basically broke and you're being run by a massive conglomerate whose main goal is to make as much money as possible, and people are saying, I'm going to give you $1 million. I'm from the fossil fuel industry to put this advertisement in there. And suddenly they're like, oh, are we going to do an expose on how overconsumption harms the environment, or how the fossil fuel industry needs to be abolished, right? Or nationalized or whatever. They're not going to be happy with that. Okay. No. And so, it's how you feed the animal, and you often get what you ask for, so.
What are some of those, you were talking about how they have all this information on us, what type of information do they have?
Well, pretty much anything you do online. And I mean, in America, we have, it's less regulated. Our privacy is less regulated in the United States than in Europe. So in Europe,
really?
they have a little bit less. And some of the, I teach in Europe every summer, almost every summer, and we meet with digital communication companies.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are like, wow, we're amazed at what you can get away with in the United States versus Europe. And so, they know pretty much everything, your location. They probably know your voting records. They know, it's, what you like, how much time you spend in a store, what you look at. Basically, you name it. They can go through your emails. That's not protected like regular mail is. Credit card stuff, and then they've got all kinds of programs to find out, okay, Mac users versus non-Mac users, and these credit cards, and okay, what's going to increase our profit with this and that, So it's the world's, the largest surveillance system in the history of the world. That's basically what it is.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so creepy. Okay. So diving more into that, can you tell me a little bit about how those algorithms work? And are they personalized to each user, or is it just a general algorithm that kind of shapes its way into each different user?
First off, the technology is getting better and better and better where it was specific for specific users. Right now, sometimes it's in I forget what the marketing term is, like clusters.
Mm-hmm.
They narrowed you down by your gender, your age, your education, and your voting, and this and that, your likes and interests, and that could have been, but it's getting better and better and better where it's even more and more for individualized stuff all the time.
So it sort of started as like an umbrella algorithm, and then they're slowly getting smaller.
Yeah, specific at this stage. So, it starts out with search engines and social media. So, basically they rank information. They're going to rank information through their own algorithms, which they create. They're human made, right? And that prioritizes and deprioritizes certain topics, content, people, information, and so forth. And they've got the right to essentially discriminate how they want to, because we don't have net neutrality anymore. Net neutrality meant that the companies, it would be like a phone. If I call you on the phone, somebody can't cut us off. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But net neutrality means, well, these are deciders. They can decide what they want to do. If they want to slow this down, they can slow it down, charge more for that. They can ban this and ban that and so forth. So that's an important thing that we don't have, that we lost a few years ago, net neutrality. It was only up there for a bit. So basically, a lot of it is they're reflecting what they've already been told. Okay, so your likes, where you go on vacation, or what you like to buy, or books or music or political beliefs or whatever. And they send you these articles or messages and so forth based on that. Now, what's some of the things that's challenging with that is cocooning. I'm sure you're familiar with that term.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you're only exposed to your ideas and your beliefs, you maybe it makes you feel better, like, wow, everybody else thinks like me. But it's the system that's sending you that. And some of the research suggests that if you're constantly getting reinforced with your beliefs and what you like and so forth, that you may have less empathy for others and other opinions and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And so ultimately that's not very good for democracies to function. It's good to try to understand like multiple perspectives and different political orientations and different news channels that think, that do stuff like that. So, otherwise you see people just like stuck in this way of looking at the world, or this way of looking at the world. So I think that's challenging. The other problem, I think, is what we're seeing now is it's called algorithmic deprioritization.
Okay.
Right? And that's problematic, especially for news. So the YouTube CEO stated that the platform uses separate algorithms for independent news and authoritative kind of mainstream corporate news. Okay. And what they want to do is boost the latter. So try to get people, corral them more towards and corporate mainstream news channels and away from smaller independent sources that may be more critical or less funded by advertising interests and so forth. So we're seeing a trend with that. And basically it's harming independent news, harming independent journalism. And it's basically helped kind of this corporate control of information and so forth. So I think that's another issue that is a challenge right now in the field of communication.
Okay. All right. And so with all this going on, how would you describe our current environment?
Like the environment? Like
yeah,
planet?
Like our physical, like
Okay.
grass,
Yeah.
air pollution.
Right. Falling apart.
Yeah.
Not good. In a crisis,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where it's things are not looking good. We're not addressing these things. We're a amount of time, a few years to make some significant changes. We're seeing sea level rise. We're seeing, more hurricanes, powerful hurricanes, some of the hottest temperatures in history, the planet, crazy weather,
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of stuff. I remember I was at a conference like 4 or 5 years ago, and they said at the end of the decade, or not the decade, the century, which is not that far away, in Spain, they would see a once in a century hurricane the size of the entire country just go through and wipe it out. But every year it would come back and just start wiping things out. And I was like, wow. That was one scientific projection,
Mm-hmm.
right? But and I was just thinking, wow, imagine in the United States in the Gulf where the water's probably even hotter, and it's going to cause billions of dollars of damage. So, we're in a massive crisis. We got a few years to change things, and the system and the politicians don't appear to be interested, and people are going to have to be more active and I think a little more forceful as they move with actions and so forth like that to try to save the planet.
And with the cocooning, as you coined it, it's kind of hard to get that information spread out there since everyone has already gotten into their lanes of where they're getting their information. Because we're all kind of sort of receiving different information surrounding the environment and what the actual science is. So it sort of ties into that.
Yeah, like less than 25% of the public hear about climate change in the media like about once a month. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's more media silence now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like climate silence. It's called climate silence. It's best to be quiet, not talk about that much, because it can offend a lot of people. You have to do systemic change. You can be accused of being biased for one political party or another, which is ridiculous because science isn't politicized, and so, yeah, I mean, that's a whole other topic we could talk about, but only like 26% of Americans are alarmed, by climate change, according to a recent poll. So it's that's why I think media reform is a big issue with our news. It's too commercialized, right? It's like the fox in charge of the chicken coop. You know what I mean? It's not gonna work out well in the end. So, what's the solution? We need more public, non-commercial, non-advertising supported media that kind of free the constraints of these forces that are pushing forward the climate emergency, right?
Do you see that happening? Or do you think we're just going to get into a deeper hole?
I think if there was, our political system is so based on money, it's becoming less democratic. if there was some reform to get money out of politics and, I think if they were able to incorporate a media reform measure into like the Green New Deal or whatever they're going to call it next, as part of a massive project, I think they could do it. I think they could reform the media and open it up to more of a public, non-commercial system. So we'll see. There's always
there
hope.
is a little bit of hope.
Yeah.
That's good.
There's always hope.
Okay, so sort of switching gears a little bit. So we talked about how overconsumption is obviously detrimental to our environment. With all of the things that we're purchasing, when we throw them away, a lot of the time they go to landfills. How does overconsumption affect our level of waste and our landfills in America?
Well, it fills them up and pollutes them. That's the easy answer. But I want to talk a little bit about it's called obsolescence. You know what that is?
No.
It's basically it's a business plan to make a lifespan short of products to increase profits, right? So if I make a phone, I can make it last for 10 years, or I can make it last for a year and a half. And if I make it last for a year and a half, people can buy more and more phones all the time. If I made it last for 10 to 20 years, they're not going to buy my phone all the time, and I'll make less money. And so this obsolescence is this business plan is what's filling up and polluting a lot of these wastes and landfills and so forth. And especially for the digital world, right? We're seeing it with, advertising is convincing us we always have to get the newest and latest iPhone, the latest pad, or whatever it is, computer and so forth. And sometimes we're seeing these old products work fine, but you can't update it because the software doesn't work. So you're forced to get rid of it, right? So even though the old things work, or we're convinced that we have to buy these new things. And so it's like hundreds of millions of still working items are discarded every year, right? And it's all these chemicals and minerals and toxins and stuff that goes into the landfill. Apple, they used to be, you could change the batteries before. Now, supposedly you can't change the batteries. They're sealed. It's harder to change the components. These phones and everything, the average lifespan is 12 to 18 months now. That's it, right? Same with TVs, iPads, blah, blah, blah. And most of this stuff, the toxic digital waste, is shipped to other countries around the world, okay? Third world countries, okay? Then kids go through it, trying to find out parts, get cancer, leaks into the water system, gets polluted. There's all kinds of history in cases all over the world. But yeah, we ship a lot of the e-waste, that's what it's called, out. And the other problem is just like the energy that's required, because everybody has these gadgets now, multiple gadgets, right? The energy that's required for them is ultimately unsustainable. There's not enough power that's being created for this. And a lot of it is that's powering this stuff, or that's sucking up all the juice is the cloud. Okay, this cloud system.
Like
so
iCloud?
Everything's in the pardon?
iCloud?
Yeah,
okay.
iCloud, cloud, whatever. Where all the data, they want everything now into the cloud, so then they can look at that stuff and sell that information too, right? And like cloud computing between 2012 and 2015 increased the carbon footprint to the equivalent of almost 5 million cars. Okay, so
my gosh.
So people think, the cloud is clean and nice, don't have to worry about anything. No. The energy consumption and the carbon footprint and so forth for cloud computing is not good at all. PC, a monitor and so forth use the same volume of resources as an SUV, car. So like the digital world has a facade of being nice and clean, but behind it is very harmful. Okay. And again, everything now uses the the internet, right? Everything. TVs, houses, toys, glasses, echoes, watches, cars, even toilets, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it all goes into this cloud. And, that's a major challenge.
Yeah. So it's kind of something that was paperless is sort of fake. We'll almost be better off with just using paper.
It might be. Yeah, it's a sustainable thing. It might be a little more sustainable, honestly. Crazy.
So do you think this overconsumption is leading to climate change? And how so?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the roots of it is our production system. We live in a capitalist world, a capitalist economy.
Yeah.
It's a production system that, and we're creative a consumer society. This is a consumer society. There's many different ways to create societies around the world. Not everybody has a consumer society. We have this consumer society. And growth economics requires overconsumption, okay? It's destroying the planet, really. So, there's a need for consumption to meet production. And in order to get people to consume that much, you need want and desire, and advertising comes in and helps that.
Mm-hmm.
So you produce all these things, you have advertising, people believe, oh my God, this is important, we have to get it, and so forth. Now, again, the problem is that the production of all these goods and services is one of the main drivers of creating carbon emissions that is behind the climate crisis. So this consumer society and the production. And it doesn't mean that all production is bad. If you have a sustainable system of production, I don't think there's any problem with that. People will be very happy with that. The problem is it's way easier to use products that pollute the environment. It's negative for the environment. It's way cheaper to use that as in these production processes, right? And so those go on, and the transportation of all these goods and so forth too. So it goes on to emit carbon emissions, and we've got, the crisis right now. And the data indicates, this is interesting because everything's grow constantly, right? Grow. The data indicate that 1% growth of a national economy is associated with a 0.6 to 0.8% increase in carbon emissions, okay? And a 0.8% growth in resource use. So the more you grow, the more the economy goes, the more emissions come out and the more of the natural environment it
deteriorates.
Up, right? So that's a problem. It basically means that nonstop economic growth and profit accumulation are ultimately at odds with planet sustainability, sustaining the planet, okay? And that's a challenge, right? And the U.S. and Western Europe consume, about 60% of pretty much everything that's produced, okay, the U.S. and Europe, but we only constitute about 10% of the population, okay? So you can look at consumption, comparatively between countries and also within countries themselves. And again, the world's richest 10% of people produce half of carbon emissions. Okay, so it's kind of a class issue too, right? So the U.S. constitutes the largest marketplace, devours about 32% of total consumption, yet the U.S. is only 5% of the Earth's population, right? And it produces 25% of worldwide emissions. So not looking good. About 70% of global emissions of carbon monoxide come from about 20% of the world's population, okay? And what happens is, capitalism has uplifted a lot of people, but it's also created a very small number of super rich people, okay? And this very small number of super rich people, their carbon footprints are off the charts, okay? So I think, so that means inequality is also now part of, if you're interested in sustainability, you have to look at inequality because this group, it also grew during COVID, okay? The number of millionaires how much did it grow? I think it created 5 million more millionaires, okay, during COVID. And they're consuming too much. They get massive yachts. Yachts are, going off the shelves left and right, out of the docks. And so, that's a problem. And even regular Americans too are consuming more. If you look in the 60s, to today, they're consuming way more paper, meat, energy, all kinds of stuff. And again, the U.S. is also kind of the main proponent of going around the world to liberalize, marketplaces, to bring in more companies and free trade to get this consumption going. Okay,
yeah.
Even more so.
Another issue with that is a lot of the companies that have started to focus on sustainability and producing products and clothing that isn't going to harm the environment, those prices get driven up so high, so then only the upper class really can realistically afford these things. And so it's also just an accessibility issue where it's only, for a lot of people, it's only realistic to buy from companies that are harmful for the environment.
Exactly. Yeah. And, do people, thinking about the climate crisis now is almost like a luxury.
Mm-hmm.
People are, almost half the population is low income. You've got problems with electricity, we've got inflation, access to healthcare, education. Everything's been privatized, and expensive. So exactly, it's that's the dilemma. How do you change that? How do you make sure that the marketplace can be sustainable and or profitable, or do we need to reassess using growth economics as an indicator that is supposedly beneficial for the planet and society? Maybe we need to be looking at something more equitable and sustainable human development, right? Maybe that should be how our structure is in place for humanity, okay? But instead we've got a structure in place for humanity that prioritizes profit over sustainability for the entire planet. That's crazy. Talk to anybody, they would be like, that's insane. And so hopefully with education and, social movements and stuff, we can start integrating these things and transitioning to a more equitable and sustainable system.
That kind of goes perfectly with my last questions, which is what are some ways as a consumer, how can we help combat this issue on a more individualistic side?
Well, I think the first thing to think about with that question is it possible for individual consumers to negate the negative effects from the climate disaster on their own? And the answer is no. Okay? Flat out, no. According to science, everything I've read so far. And ultimately, it's probably be more of a mix. Okay? Some individual consumers, we can do certain things. But in the end, we need government policy that can affect structures in our society. Okay? That's what's going to do more good. We need immediate government regulation to bring down carbon emissions. There's so much stuff. We need to rethink the production processes because they're destroying the environment. Do we need all these ceramic statues and things? There's tons of used stuff everywhere that we can just fix a little bit and use that instead, right? But the problem is it's often cheaper to buy something new than have something old that's broken fixed, right? So that we really need to rethink a lot of society, and society is shaped by politics and by governments. Okay, and right now the governments aren't listening to science, and they're not listening to the public very much at all. They're listening to the people that pay them, right? Which is in the United States, companies, private interest, wealthy, billionaires, and so forth like that. Okay, and they've got the most to lose in a sustainable world, right? So that's why they're resisting any kind of regulation or change because it would affect their profits in the long run. So you need government regulation of the oil industry, on production processes. We need to create some kind of public transportation situation, but then car manufacturers aren't going to be happy about that. You know what I mean? So it's like, there's a lot of stuff. And ultimately, I think in the United States and even around the world, it's like we're becoming a flawed democracy. So even though we know these things, we got to take money out of the system. We have to take money out of politics. We need to expand political parties. We need to reform. We need to democratize things. And hopefully there will be a social movement like that, like there was in the 30s, 20s, 30s, so forth, after the Gilded Age, that brought about a lot of progressive change. With the key word is equitable and sustainable human development is what we should hopefully be striving for.
Okay, so it's more government higher up scale than anything.
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking at it, can individual consumers save the world? Not much. No.
Yeah.
My understanding is, no, I might be flawed, but they can help a little bit. They're part of this process. And so what we do consume and so forth can help for sure. But, we need to keep oil in the ground. We need to change production processes, and so forth. Just like you said earlier, right? The cheaper products that are harming the planet, the only thing that's what people can afford.
I know.
Okay. So you need government incentives to change that system and to make it accessible if that's the system that people want to move forward with. And that takes a lot of government regulation, as long as it's regulated in favor of sustainability and the planet, right? And it has to happen like immediately. Time is running out. So.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. A lot to change.
Yeah, but, you look at World War II and they totally rechanged the economy, within a couple of years. And, I think anything's possible, So let's hope that there'll be more people like you doing podcasts and sending out information to everybody. And slowly but surely we'll create more knowledge about this and we'll see what happens.
Spread information, spread awareness.
There you go. You got that right.
Thank you so much for spending the time to help me with this project. You brought some very valuable information to the table. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you, Lauren. I wish you good luck on your assignment.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Okay, thanks.